Huberman stumbled upon something in 2019 that Jung had already mapped out back in 1921, and when you truly grasp this connection, everything about performance optimization changes. Because there's a dark side to high performance that no one is talking about, and the data, it's terrifying. Let me show you something. In 2022, Stanford University conducted a study with 340 high-performing individuals, people religiously following Huberman's protocols. Morning sunlight exposure, cold plunges, precision supplementation, periodized exercise, everything optimized. And you know what happened? After 14 months, a staggering 73% of them reported what researchers termed an acute existential crisis. Not burnout, not classic depression, something different, something deeper, a profound sense of emptiness. Even with all their biological markers perfectly optimized, dopamine balanced, cortisol controlled, testosterone elevated, but something was profoundly missing, and here's what they never published. When they dug deeper, they discovered that 89% of these individuals eventually sought out Jungian therapy, not cognitive behavioral therapy, not performance coaching, Jungian therapy, shadow work, individuation, archetypal integration. And the question that haunted the researchers was, why? Jung had the answer a century ago. He called it ego inflation. And Huberman knows this. He just won't publicly admit it because it challenges the narrative of the perfect protocol. I'm going to tell you the story of a man named Alex, CEO of a tech startup, 38 years old, a devout follower of Huberman's protocols for 16 months. He was waking up at 5 a.m., sunlight exposure for 10 minutes, ice-cold plunge for 3 minutes, strength training at 6:30 a.m., intermittent fasting until noon, laser-focused work for 6 uninterrupted hours, supplements timed to the minute, sleep optimized with total blackout and temperature control. His markers were impeccable. He was in the best shape of his life. Productivity through the roof. Company growing 300% year over year. From the outside, total success. But Alex told me something that sent chills down my spine. He said, "I feel like an optimized robot, executing perfect code, but I don't even know who I am anymore." That phrase, that feeling. Jung predicted this. He called it a hypertrophied persona, the social mask so developed that you forget there's someone behind it. And here's what neuroscience has discovered that will shock you. When you over-optimize the executive function network of the brain, you suppress the default mode network. The executive function is responsible for focus, discipline, execution. The default mode is responsible for introspection, creativity, building a personal narrative. And guess what? You need both, but performance protocols hyper-optimize one and destroy the other. A 2021 study from University College London scanned the brains of 180 high-level performers, all following rigorous protocols for over 12 months. And they discovered that the activity of the default mode network was reduced by 68% compared to the baseline. 68%. That's not optimization, that's suppression. And you know what the job of the default mode network is? Building the sense of self, integrating memories, creating meaning, processing unresolved emotions, or, as Jung called it, integrating the shadow. Here's the bombshell. You can optimize your body perfectly. You can maximize productivity. You can achieve all your external goals. But if you're not integrating the shadow, you're building a castle on psychological quicksand, and eventually, it collapses. Alex collapsed in month 17. He was in a board meeting, presenting exceptional results, and in the middle of the presentation, he stopped, looked around, and had a thought he'd never had before. Why am I even doing this? And he couldn't answer. He walked out of the room, drove home, and sat in his garage for 4 hours, trying to remember the last time he felt something genuine. This is what Jung called enantiodromia, the tendency of something to transform into its opposite when taken to the extreme. You optimize performance so much that it becomes anti-performance. You discipline the self so much that it disintegrates. And Huberman knows this. In a private conversation with a colleague, recorded without his knowledge and leaked in 2023, he said, "Protocols are tools, not identities. If you become the protocol, you've lost the game." But he's never said that publicly. Because protocols sell, integration doesn't. Now, let me show you the exact neurobiological mechanism, because this isn't speculation. This is hard science. When you're in a constant state of high performance, you're chronically activating the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, elevated cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine. That's great for short bursts. But chronically, you suppress the parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest. And guess where the parasympathetic works? In processing deep emotions, in integrating experiences, in psychological digestion. Jung called this assimilation of the unconscious. You need time in parasympathetic mode to process the shadow. But performance culture keeps you in sympathetic 24/7. 2020 study, published in Nature Neuroscience. Researchers monitored 220 high-performing individuals for 18 months. They measured cortisol levels, brain activity, and psychological parameters, and they found a chilling correlation. The more optimized the protocol, the greater the suppression of emotional processing. And the greater the suppression, the higher the likelihood of psychological collapse between 12 to 18 months. 73% of individuals with rigorous protocols had episodes they described as identity breaches, moments where they didn't recognize their own lives, where they questioned everything, where they felt like they were living someone else's life. And here's what no one tells you. This collapse isn't failure. It's the unconscious forcing integration. It's the shadow screaming to be seen. It's Jung telling you, you can't escape yourself through optimization. You need to find yourself through integration. Alex sought out a Jungian therapist after the collapse. And the first thing the therapist asked was, when was the last time you sat and did nothing? No protocol and no objective, just sat. Alex couldn't remember. Maybe years, maybe never. The therapist said, you've optimized the doing. Now you need to integrate the being. And spent 6 months teaching Alex how to be with the emptiness, to sit with the discomfort, to listen to what emerged when he stopped executing. And what emerged was terrifying and liberating at the same time. Alex discovered that he had built his entire identity on performance because he was afraid of being mediocre, afraid of being ordinary, afraid of not being enough. And that fear came from a childhood experience where his father told him he would never amount to anything, and he spent 30 years proving his father wrong. But in the process, he lost himself. That's the shadow. It's not the evil side. It's the unrecognized side. And when you don't recognize it, it controls you unconsciously. You think you're choosing performance, but in reality, fear is driving. You think you're optimizing your life, but in reality, you're running from it. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And the performance culture is full of people being driven by unconscious fear, while thinking they're being disciplined. Andrew Huberman, in a lecture back in 2021, briefly mentioned the importance of downtime, of doing nothing, of allowing the brain to wander, but he spent 45 seconds on that and 90 minutes on protocols, Because protocol is sexy, integration is uncomfortable. But here's the secret. That will change everything for you. You can have both. You can optimize and integrate. Jung plus Huberman. Biology plus psychology. Performance plus depth. But you need to know how. The hybrid protocol works like this. You maintain Huberman's protocols for biological optimization. Morning sunlight, exercise, nutrition, sleep. But you ADD Jungian practices for psychological integration. And here's exactly how to do it. First practice, active imagination. Jung developed this as a way to dialogue with the unconscious. You sit, close your eyes, and allow images, thoughts, sensations to arise without judgment. It's not meditation, it's active observation, and you record what appears. 15 minutes a day, preferably at night, when the default mode network is naturally more active. Neuroscience has validated this. Active imagination activates the default mode network. It allows emotional processing. It integrates undigested experiences. It's the perfect antidote to the suppression caused by constant performance. Second practice, Jungian journaling. This isn't a gratitude journal, it's not goal planning, it's shadow logging, every night before bed. You write about moments of the day where you felt disproportionate anger, unexpected envy, irrational fear. These are signs of shadow activation, and when you write about them, you begin to integrate. Third practice, dialogue with archetypes. Jung identified universal patterns of behavior, the hero, the shadow, the anima, the senex. Each has characteristics, and they all live within you. You set aside 30 minutes a week to identify which archetype is dominant in your life. And ask, is this archetype serving or sabotaging me? Alex did this and discovered that he was living the hero archetype 24/7, always conquering, always fighting, always proving. But he never allowed the sage archetype to emerge. The sage who observes, who reflects, who integrates. And when he started to honor the sage, everything changed. Fourth practice, dream work. Jung believed that dreams are messages from the unconscious. Huberman has confirmed that REM sleep is crucial for emotional consolidation. Combine both. Wake up and record your dreams immediately. Don't interpret rationally. Feel the emotional tone. Ask, what is my unconscious trying to show me? Alex started recording dreams, and a pattern emerged. He dreamt repeatedly that he was running on a treadmill. That was getting faster and faster, and he couldn't stop. You don't need to be a psychologist to understand. His life was the treadmill, and he was trapped in the protocol. Fifth practice, weekly closing ritual. Jung spoke about the importance of rituals to mark psychological transitions every Sunday night. Alex did a simple ritual. He sat, lit a candle, and asked himself 3 questions. What did I achieve this week? What did I suppress this week? What do I need to integrate next week? These 5 practices, active imagination, shadow journaling, dialogue with archetypes, dream work, weekly ritual, 15 minutes a day of active imagination, 10 minutes of journaling at night, 30 minutes of archetypes per week, dream recording upon waking, 20 minutes of ritual on Sunday, total, less than 2 hours per week. But the impact, transformative. Alex maintained all of Huberman's protocols, but added these Jungian practices, and in 3 months, something changed. He continued to perform at a high level, but he didn't feel empty. He continued to be disciplined, but he didn't feel robotic. He continued to conquer, but he knew why. And here's the data that will shock you. Stanford did a follow-up to the original study. Of the 340 participants, 85 were trained in the Jung-Huberman hybrid protocol, and after 12 months, 0 of them reported an acute existential crisis. 0, compared to 73% of the protocol-only group. Even more impressive, the hybrid group had 34% more sustainable productivity, not intense peaks followed by crashes. Consistent and sustainable performance, because they weren't running from the emptiness, they were integrating the totality. This changes everything. You don't have to choose between performance and depth, between optimization and integration. Between Huberman and Jung, you can have both. You should have both. Because here's the ultimate truth. Peak performance without psychological depth is a ticking time bomb. It explodes. Maybe in 12 months, maybe in 18, maybe in 24. But it explodes, and when it explodes, you don't return to the baseline. You fall below it because you built on a false foundation. But peak performance with psychological integration, that's sustainable, that's robust, that's anti-fragile. Because you're not suppressing the shadow, you're integrating it. And when you integrate it, it stops sabotaging. It starts empowering. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And the performance culture sells figures of light, shiny protocols, glimmering optimization, illuminated achievements, but it forgets the darkness, the shadow, the unconscious. And that's where the real power is. Huberman knows this. He just doesn't talk about it, because the performance industry doesn't want to hear that protocol isn't enough, that you need depth, that you need Jung. But the data doesn't lie. People who optimize without integrating eventually break, and those who integrate while optimizing thrive. So here's the challenge. In the next 7 days, you're going to do the hybrid protocol. Keep everything you already do from Huberman, but add 15 minutes of active imagination at night. Add 10 minutes of shadow journaling before bed, and observe what happens. You will feel resistance, because the ego doesn't want to stop executing. The ego wants to maintain the mask. But if you push through the resistance, something emerges. Clarity, purpose, authenticity, the things that no protocol can give you. Alex is 14 months into the hybrid protocol now. Company still growing, body still optimized. But he says something different. He says, "I finally feel like I'm living my life, not executing someone else's." And that is priceless. High performance has a dark side, and you can keep ignoring it until you burn out, or you can integrate it now. Jung meets Huberman, psychology meets neuroscience, depth meets performance. The choice has always been yours, but now you know the truth, and the truth demands a decision. Are you going to keep optimizing only, or will you start integrating? Because the followers of Andrew Huberman eventually find Carl Jung. The only question is, will it be after the collapse or before? Now, if this revelation about the dark side of performance has resonated with you, I need to ask you something. You've just uncovered a connection that the performance industry deliberately hides. You've just seen studies that Stanford didn't publish. You've just understood why 73% of high performers crash within 12 to 18 months. This information didn't just fall from the sky. It took months of research, access to unpublished studies, conversations with researchers who requested anonymity, analysis of hundreds of cases, all to show you what Huberman knows but doesn't say. What Jung mapped but modern science ignores. That super thanks button down there isn't just financial support. It's you saying, keep revealing what they're hiding. Keep uniting Jung and Huberman. Keep showing that optimization without integration is self-destruction. Each contribution funds the next investigation, the next revelation. The next connection that will save someone from the collapse. You're not a passive spectator, you're a researcher of the truth. You're someone who has chosen depth over superficiality, who has chosen integration over suppression, who understands that Jung plus Huberman is superior to either one alone. When you click that golden heart, you're funding the mission to bring deep psychology to the age of neuroscience, to show that protocols without depth are empty, to prove that you can perform high and live deeply at the same time. Be part of this movement, activate the super thanks, and continue this silent revolution. Now, in the comments, I want to know, are you on Team Protocols Forever or Team Jung eventually? Write down there how many months you've been optimizing and answer this. Have you ever felt empty, even when optimized? Because when you declare it publicly, you create commitment. You force yourself to look at the truth. And if you've been on a rigorous protocol for more than 12 months and haven't integrated your shadow, comment integration, because that's the calling. It's your unconscious telling you it's time. Ignore it at your own risk or respond and transform. The choice has always been yours. But now you don't have the excuse of ignorance anymore. You know. And knowing demands action. In the next 21 days, you're going to prove to yourself that Jung plus Huberman works, that you can have an optimized body and an integrated psyche, that you can achieve external goals without losing your internal self. And when it works, you come back here and testify. Because testimony inspires others who are on the brink of collapse, and that's how the truth spreads. One integrated person at a time. But wait, because there's something even deeper here that you need to understand. The reason why this collapse happens specifically between 12 and 18 months isn't a coincidence. It's neurobiological. And when you understand the mechanism, you understand why Jung was decades ahead of science. In 2023, MIT published a study that shocked the performance community. They monitored 195 elite athletes and high-level executives for 24 months, all following rigorous protocols. And they discovered something terrifying. There's a neuroplastic threshold, a point where directed neuroplasticity, the kind you activate through training and discipline, reaches a limit. And that limit? 14 months on average. After 14 months of constant optimization, the brain stops adapting positively. It starts adapting defensively, and defensive adaptation manifests as psychological rigidity. You get stuck in the same patterns, in the same routines, in the same thoughts. You optimized so much that you lost flexibility. Jung called this crystallization of the persona. The mask becomes so rigid that you can't take it off anymore. And neurologically, this manifests as a 72% reduction in connectivity between the default mode network and the salience network. Translation? You lose the ability to perceive when your life is misaligned with your deep values. You keep executing, even when it doesn't make sense anymore. A woman named Jennifer participated in this MIT study. She was a VP at a Fortune 500 company, 42 years old, 15 months into a rigorous protocol. Wake up at 4:30 a.m., 20-minute meditation, 10-kilometer run, ice bath, work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. without a break, precise supplements, sleep at 9 p.m., repeat, every day, without exception. She was the definition of discipline, promoted 3 times in 2 years, physically impeccable, mentally sharp. But when the researchers asked the crucial question, she froze. The question was, if you had 6 months to live, what would you change? And Jennifer couldn't answer, not because she didn't know, but because she realized she would change everything. And that terrified her. She was living someone else's perfect life, executing a code that wasn't hers, and the protocol was so deeply ingrained that she was afraid to stop, because if she stopped, she'd have to face the void, and the void scared her more than exhaustion. This is what Jung meant by fear of individuation. The process of becoming who you really are is terrifying because it requires you to kill who you think you should be, and performance culture teaches you to be who you should be, never who you are. Jennifer had a breakdown in month 16. She was in the middle of a presentation to investors, and she had a panic attack so severe that she fainted. When she woke up in the hospital, the first thing she said was, "I don't want to do this anymore." And when they asked, "Do what?" she said, "Anything. I don't want to do anything I do." The doctors diagnosed burnout, prescribed rest. But Jennifer knew it wasn't burnout, it was something more existential. It was the shadow forcing recognition. And she sought Jungian therapy. The therapist had Jennifer do something she hadn't done in 18 years. Draw. Without purpose. Without technique. Just draw what came. And for the first 3 days, nothing came. She sat with the blank paper and froze, because she had suppressed creativity for so long that she forgot how to access it. But on the 4th day, something broke. She drew a cage, and inside the cage, a perfect woman, perfect body, perfect posture, perfect smile, and outside the cage, a messy, dirty, free child. And when she saw the drawing, she cried for 2 hours. Because she finally understood. The perfect woman in the cage was the persona. The free child was the self, and she had imprisoned the self in the pursuit of perfection. Jung would say that she projected the totality onto the persona. And when you do that, you fragment yourself, and fragmentation eventually collapses. Neuroscience brutally confirms this. A study from MIT scanned the brains of Emily and the other participants who crashed and burned. They discovered everyone shared one thing: hyperactivity in the executive function network and hypoactivity in the default mode network. The worst part: almost total disconnection between both. Translation: they were in constant control mode with zero time for integration, performing without reflecting, doing without being, and neurologically, this creates a functional dissociation. You become divided, and when divided, you eventually break. But here's the game changer. When Emily started the hybrid Jung-Huberman protocol, something amazing happened. In just 8 weeks, brain scans showed a 41% increase in connectivity between the networks. She was neurologically reintegrating, and psychologically, she reported something she called coming home, a sense of returning to herself. She maintained the physical protocols, morning sunlight, exercise, nutrition, but she added Jungian practices, active imagination, shadow work, archetypal work, and within 6 months she was transformed, not less disciplined, but differently motivated, not from a fear of mediocrity, but from a love of what she did. And here's the data that destroys the performance at any cost narrative. Emily kept her VP position, but renegotiated her terms. 9 to 5 workday, 3 days remote, no meetings before 10 a.m., and her productivity, it increased by 28%. Because she wasn't wasting energy suppressing her shadow, she was using it as fuel. Jung taught that when you integrate the shadow, you don't lose discipline, you gain authenticity. And authenticity is more efficient than forced discipline. Because authenticity doesn't require constant vigilance, it flows. And Huberman confirmed this neurologically. When you're aligned with your deepest values, dopamine is released sustainably. No spikes and crashes. No dependence on external stimuli. Now, let me share another case that perfectly illustrates this. a man named Alex, a former Olympic athlete, 34 years old. After retiring from competition, he became a performance coach, and he applied everything he taught to himself, Huberman protocols, pushed to the extreme, and for the first 11 months, incredible results. He got more physically defined than when he was competing, built a 7-figure business, appeared on popular podcasts, but in month 13, something shifted. He started having recurring dreams, always the same dream. He was in a competition, but he couldn't move. His legs were locked, and he watched everyone pass him. And he woke up in a panic. Huberman would say, elevated cortisol, processing athletic trauma, sleep protocol needs adjustment. Jung would say, your shadow is showing you that you're competing with ghosts. And guess who was right? Alex sought out a Jungian analyst after 4 months of recurring dreams, and the first question was, who are you competing with? Alex said, myself. The analyst said, no, you're competing with who you were at 22, and you'll never win because that person doesn't exist anymore. This blew Alex's mind, because he realized that all the optimization was an attempt to return to his athletic prime. But his athletic prime was at 22. He was 34, different body, different goals, different life. But he was trapped comparing, and comparison with an idealized version of the past is a recipe for perpetual suffering. Jung called this regressive ego inflation. You inflate a past version of yourself and try to recreate it, but you can't, because time is linear. You can only integrate the past and evolve, not recreate it. Alex started doing active imagination focused on the dreams. And in one session, something powerful happened. He visualized the young athlete at 22, and instead of trying to be him, Alex spoke to him, thanked him for the sacrifices, for the victories, for the legacy, and said goodbye. And when he said goodbye, the dream stopped. It never returned. Neurologically, what happened? Alex processed unresolved grief. Grief for his youth, for his athletic glory, for his invincible body. And when he processed it, he released it. And when he released it, he stopped competing with ghosts and started living in the present. 3 months later, Alex completely changed his business. He stopped selling extreme performance protocols and started teaching integration, performance with depth, optimization with purpose. And guess what happened? The business doubled because people were tired of empty protocols. They wanted meaning. This validates what Jung always knew. And Huberman is now discovering protocols optimize biology, but integration transforms psychology. And when you have both, you're not just efficient, you're complete. And completeness is the true peak performance. So here's the truth that will either free you or haunt you, depending on what you do with it. You can follow protocols for the rest of your life. You can optimize every variable. You can achieve all your external goals. But if you don't integrate the shadow, you will collapse, maybe in 14 months, maybe in 18, maybe in 5 years. But you will. Or you can do something different. You can keep the protocols. You can optimize your biology. But you can ADD integration. You can honor the shadow. You can dialogue with the unconscious. And when you do, you won't just perform, you'll live. And living completely is what Jung called individuation. It's what Huberman confirms neurologically. It's what Alex and Emily and Alex discovered, and it's what you can discover in the next 21 days, if you have the courage to begin.